We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to our instant analysis show on Buckeye Breakdown. That was exactly what the Ohio State Buckeyes needed tonight. 38-3, the final score, as the Buckeyes, quite frankly, rampaged Michigan State. The game was not nearly as close as that 5-touchdown difference on the scoreboard might indicate. There were moments tonight that felt a little bit more like an exhibition than a competitive game, but it was a pretty impressive victory for the Buckeyes. Brendan Gulick, Anthony Moeglin with you. We're both covering remotely tonight. And Meg's a night where I think I would say this was probably Kyle McCord's best game as a Buckeye. He looked really, really good.
For sure. He looked sharp. He looked confident. He looked smooth. And Coach Day, after the game in his presser, said the best thing that he did tonight, he had great feet. And if you were watching the broadcast, they kept talking about how his feet and his arm and his eyes were all in line. And you could see the results of that. You know, his accuracy was off the charts tonight. Thought his decision-making was incredible. And it did help that Michigan State's defense isn't the best. But that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. There's 11 guys on the other side of the ball, and you got to deliver it accurately and on time. And he did that all night long and really put together his best game this year and his best game as a Buckeye.
24 of 31 for 335 yards, 3 touchdowns tonight, completing 77% of his passes. Pretty darn good. And, I say I think because obviously the last couple of weeks, I know he's turned it over a couple times, but he's largely looked really, really good and obviously completed the first 11 passes in a row last week. But I still thought he saw the game better this week. To your point, maybe some of that was the fact that Michigan State is they're kind of in disarray right now. And I almost feel like you have to pull the plug a little bit on any true criticism for them. Maybe they don't feel that way, but I just don't have very high expectations for them given what they've gone through this year. Maybe moving forward, we can change our expectations of them. But I thought it was really important for Ohio State to back up last week's tough win on the road with a really important showing at home under the lights on national TV against a program that, for lack of a better way to say it, man, Michigan beat the crap out of. So you got to go do the same thing if you're trying to keep racking up those data points that look similarly.
Yeah, no question. And my favorite part about tonight's game was the fast start. And again, that was referenced on the broadcast a number of times, but it's really true. And it doesn't matter what the competition is on the other side. We've been saying all year long, and even just go back 1 week to the Rutgers game where you go into halftime down 9-7, and you're thinking, hey, it could have gone differently here or there. Tonight, it was no discussion. We came out first drive, right down the field, touchdown. Second drive, right down the field, touchdown. You mix in a couple stops on the other side, and all of a sudden, the game's out of reach right away. I mean, it was over before, 1 minute into the second quarter, So the fast start for me was my favorite part, and that goes into why I thought Kyle just played so well, is because that kind of sometimes falls on the quarterback, right? It's a third down on the first drive where you have to make a completion or a tough ball, and then you can get the ball to Marvin Harrison and you just do great things. But I thought the fast start tonight was really my favorite part of the performance from the offense, for sure.
All right, so let's talk Marvin Harrison for a minute. This is it's a common theme, right? And maybe the rest of the country is starting to realize it a little bit more, how impressive truly he is. Ultimately, I don't know if he's going to win the Heisman. There is such a heavy statistical component that's involved with that. But he needed another game that you could point to and be like, see, this is what he's capable of, right? Because you're going to mix in a few lower statistical games just because of the way this season has gone. And tonight, 7 catches on 9 targets for 149 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it was so painfully obvious that he was the best player on the field. And anytime the ball was thrown his direction, with the exception of one one drop that I guess just proved he's still a human and not, an extraterrestrial. He was unstoppable again.
And add one carry, 19 yards, and a rushing
Yeah,
score.
yeah,
well.
right.
Yeah,
Which he said afterward was his favorite score of the night.
Yeah, which was so cool, and it was very obvious right away, kind of what Ryan Day and the coaching staff was trying to do. Like, hey, let's get Marvin in the end zone. He deserves a night like this. He's put together, just so many games back and forth, and he's been so reliable for this team. And it was time to hey, we're going to we're going to reward you a little bit. That touchdown catch up the sidelines, I don't know how that happens. Perfect pass, great hands, got that foot down. I mean, there was got 2 feet in. There was probably a 1 yard by 1 yard box where that ball could be, and it landed in it, and Marvin made a great catch. I watched that play, I don't know, 30 times now. It's just amazing where that ball got dropped and how his body control is just spectacular. And it was fun to watch him. And he played a half, right? He played one drive in the third quarter and did all of that in a half. It was just a really special night for Marvin, and you're hopeful that it does enough to keep him in that Heisman conversation. But I think more importantly, the jury may be closing up shop on Marvin Harrison, may be the best non-quarterback player in the country for sure, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if anybody didn't see him come to the podium post game, you can check that on our YouTube channel. It's a new day. It's a new era in college football. And if there's ever a guy that screams, I'm the real deal wide receiver. I mean, come on, man. The hair, the glasses, the chain. It's Marv knows he's good, and he's humble in his answers, and I appreciate that about him. But he is a superstar, and he can back it up. So that's fine.
It was also,
he doesn't let it get to his head.
It was also cool. He stood on the podium, and it was cool. He was excited about it. You could tell he was excited because they normally he has them on the back tables in the back. And he's like, "Hey, I'm up on the big podium today," and he was jokingly looking around at the reporters. It was really cool. It's worth the watch if you have the time to watch it.
All right. So while Marvin's going to take a lot of the headlines, and he should, and TreVeyon Henderson looked like TreVeyon again tonight. He had another good night. 13 carries, 63 yards, and a touchdown. Kyle played terrific football. I think the thing that most impressed me tonight, Lathan Ransom out, and Ryan Day indicated maybe longer term, didn't say he was done for the year, but indicated that didn't look good. So we might be talking about life after Lathan for the rest of the season, or maybe most of the rest of the season here. So no Lathan Ransom in secondary. Josh Proctor, Ryan Day says he's week to week. They're hopeful he's going to come back soon. But obviously Proctor's had a great year. He's out. And Tommy Eichenberg, who I would argue is the team's best defensive player and most consistent defensive leader, he's dealing with an injury that Ryan Day said is also week to week. Confident that he'll be back soon, but is soon next week, is soon 2 weeks, frankly, because that's what you're really starting to use as a measuring stick here. So you're missing 3 defensive starters. Yes, it's against a team that isn't great right now, but still, to give up only 3 points, that's pretty darn good.
It's really good. And you add this to Tommy Eichenberg as well. I mean, that's the leader of the defense. You mentioned leader, but the quarterback of the defense, he calls the plays in, so you're missing that guy, and that adds another layer to it. They did a little bit of a hit on the TV broadcast about Cody Simon, and I thought it was well worth it. Just him stepping up and having a really good day. 1 pass breakup, 5 total tackles, 3 solos. There wasn't much in terms of what they were getting, not a ton of offensive plays from Michigan State, but I thought that the guys on defense played very well. Sonny Styles had a sweet sack that they highlighted. It was really cool where he dropped into coverage, and it was really good. You could see his athleticism really in play, where he drops back into coverage, kind of fakes it, and then blitzes the quarterback and gets home really quickly, and thought he played pretty well. And then again, the secondary is just fantastic. It doesn't matter who is on the field. It feels like it's just plug and play on the back end, where those guys can just shut receivers down and make life for the quarterback very, very tough for 4 straight hours on a Saturday.
Jordan Hancock played really well tonight, and it was great to have Denzel Burke back. I thought he also looked good. And since we're on the health train here, obviously good to see Cade Stover back in and being the reliable weapon that he is at tight end. Obviously, Ohio State is looking at this going, okay, you come in tonight, you're 9-0, and I have to imagine that Ryan Day this week, he kind of alluded to it when he met with us on Wednesday night. Without straight out saying these words, I think he's a little frustrated that there's so much going on in the national conversation around the Michigan cheating scandal that his number one ranked team in the country that has grown immensely over the course of the year might not be quite getting the recognition they deserve, which is a weird dichotomy because they also regularly say, we don't care about the noise, we're just trying to focus on us. But Ryan Day was a little more straightforward than normal on Wednesday and basically saying like, hey, we got a pretty good team here and we should pay attention to the guys that are here playing well because they're really good and they're working their butt off and they're doing a good job of blocking out all of the other external stuff that is impossible not to see when you're an 18 to 21-year-old kid that lives on social media. It is impossible not to see all of that stuff.
No, it truly is. And, one of the things you said here is the steady growth of this team. Like you look back and it's so funny looking at coming from now the end of a season and looking back at a year where, you start in Indiana and it doesn't look great. And then you go to Notre Dame and you escape, but you win and you keep continuing to grow. And then you just beat a really tough Penn State team and you play really hard and they're just continuing this steady path of getting better. And not taking any steps back, but just continuing week by week by week. And then you come out in week 9 and you just totally look the part, right? We say it all the time. Good teams win, great teams cover. And Ohio State in a half tonight looked that was the perfect showing they needed tonight. Defense was shut down on defense. The offense for the first time put together from the very jump, from the starting gun to when they were done. They were smooth. They were efficient. They didn't turn the ball over. They just looked so good. And just so you're hitting your stride at the right time. And that's so crucial in a long football season like this to get to, to start peaking at the right time. And like you said, Coach Day's, it's funny when he wants to get a message out and we can kind of tell because we listen to him every day, but it definitely was a different message. Like, hey, you need to focus. You need to pay attention to this team because we're peaking at the right time. We're playing really good football and we're a tough team. When we're across from you, we're gonna make your life hell for a whole Saturday. So it's fun to see where this team has gotten to.
Michigan State had 88 passing yards, 94 rushing yards. They were 2 of 14 on third down. What more do you want? Ohio State suffocated another Big Ten opponent tonight. And I don't know. I think about those who are looking at the Buckeyes and trying to find something to knock. The reason they're ranked number 1 is because of this defense, period. Like, that's why they're ranked number 1 in the country right now.
And my favorite part about it is another game where you just said 2 of 14 on third down. Think back to the Penn State game. It was Penn State 1 of 16. So I'm sure you and I should spend some time looking through some of those third down numbers. When you're getting off the field on third down, like those are 3 and outs. Like maybe you give up a first down here or there, but you're forcing punts and you're controlling field position. You're giving your offense, who, if the offense found its stride tonight, if you're suffocating opposing offenses and letting this group get after it and have more opportunities to score points, this team's going to come together at the right time, and it's going to be a really scary out for anybody that they face.
So this is obviously instant analysis of tonight's win. But I think the other two things, because now that we're at this time of the year where the Buckeyes are 10-0, the other two major talking points today, if you're an Ohio State fan, are how did Michigan look? And the reality is Michigan did what I kind of expected they would do. They went to Happy Valley, and they kind of pounded Penn State. It didn't look that way necessarily on the scoreboard. Mm-hmm. I don't know why James Franklin decided to go for it on fourth down inside, fairly deep inside his own territory. Maybe that sealed Michigan's win. But literally, Michigan pounded them in that Michigan's last passing attempt was halfway through the second quarter in that game, and they literally ran their way to a victory without Jim Harbaugh on the sideline. And so we're 2 weeks away from an all-out war in Ann Arbor. And, you get to this point of the year, Megs, and it's like you're constantly comparing. How'd you look this week? How'd your opponent look this week? How'd you look? How'd they look? How'd you look? How'd they look? And you can't avoid it now.
Yeah, no question. And then you're doing the transitive property of how'd you look against Penn State? Well, how did Michigan look against Michigan State? And it gives us good conversation. But you're seeing two teams that going to look on paper, they're going to match up very well. I think that they're up front. It's two really good groups that are going to match that are going to be pounding on each other all day. I think Ohio State's going to have a little bit of advantage in the secondary, on the perimeters with the Ohio State receivers. So we'll get into more detail as we get closer. But you're just seeing two really good teams that are staring down at each other. And in 2 weeks hopefully both teams get through next week healthy. They take care of business, and you have a 1 versus 2 matchup because it's exactly what we're looking for to kind of put a cap on the season.
I'm glad you brought up the transitive property with that, because I was actually thinking about, okay, it sure looks like, barring something that feels miraculous, although I wouldn't rule it out with the Big Ten West, it sure feels like Iowa's the team that's going to end up representing the West in the title game. Mm-hmm. And Iowa played Penn State and got steamrolled. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know if the idea of the transitive property is always a perfect indicator, because teams get better throughout the year. And I do feel somewhat confident that if Iowa played Penn State again, it wouldn't be 31-0. No. Iowa, look, they scored their last touchdown today on an exceptionally short field. They took it over at the 9-yard line. They didn't exactly move the ball up and down the field against Rutgers, but they had a nice win, 22-0 against Rutgers. The lowest over-under in the history of college football hit the under. And I think the live under, by the way, was like 21.5 or something at the end of the first quarter, which was wild. But, look, I think Iowa's going to be a tough test in a Big Ten championship game if that ultimately ends up being who Ohio State or Michigan would face. Basically, if you're going into this next week for both Ohio State and Michigan, it's, hey, you got one more week to make sure that you get as right as you can possibly get. Mm-hmm. Because 2 weeks and then the winner in 3 weeks are going to have to play really, really hard against back-to-back, very likely, 2 excellent defenses.
Yeah, no question. And that Iowa team feels like a group that we'll just try to drag you into the mud. Like they're just like, hey, we're going to muck this thing up, and like we're just going to pull you down, and we're going to hold you down as long as we can. It may work, it may not. We may get blown out, but we may be able to keep this a 4-quarter game. They're an interesting group, but like you said too, the comparison of the the transitive property, like we said. Not only do teams get better throughout the year, I think teams also get worse and lose a lot of confidence. Like you look at this Penn State team before the Ohio State game, like we're kind of gearing up. Drew Aller was starting to roll,
walking on the water,
and then they get beat, and it's like Ohio State almost like breaks them, And then they try to they don't look great the next 2 weeks, and then they play Michigan again today, and like just feels like they're a broken team, So that also is a part of it too. So it's just fun for conversation. It's going to be these next couple weeks in the Big Ten are going to be awesome. They're going to be so much fun, and it's a really exciting end of the season.
Yeah, look, Ohio State and Michigan look the part. They don't just look like the class of the league. They look like the kinds of teams that are the class of college football, and it's reflected that way in the CFP rankings. I would prefer the rest of the Big Ten to figure it out a little bit. Yeah. Because in some ways, Penn State's been like this for a while. I think I saw today, James Franklin is like 4-16 against Ohio State and Michigan. That's gross. Yeah. But the reality is, Michigan State and Wisconsin, they've fallen off a little bit from where they were 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I think the league would be looked at even better if those kinds of programs performed better. It started to look like Illinois was trending the right direction, but they've had a weird rocky season. And I've never thought that Illinois looks like a really good team. Purdue, nice win today, but clearly not even close to where Ohio State and Michigan were when they played them the last couple weeks. Wisconsin got their doors blown off today by Northwestern. So it's a weird time across the league because it's clear that everybody is still chasing Ohio State and Michigan. And Penn State seems to me like they're still the best of the rest, but it's frustrating when you look at that team and you think, okay, they're good, but they're not consistently actually threatening to beat the top two teams in the league. And I want the league to look good.
Right, and it's for them. It's like, all right, you're good against the bad, but the good when you when you come up with the big boys, it's the same story every year. It is kind of frustrating that the league is so top heavy. You have 1 and 3 in the country, and then the rest of the league just kind of stinks. I think a fun answer to the problem is welcome Oregon and Washington to the league next year.
Exactly, and the 12-team playoff, and maybe Penn State gets in that. I mean, look, they won the Rose Bowl, right?
Well,
so maybe they get in the playoff, and so there's an element of like, okay, maybe we're just stuck behind these two superpowers that anybody would be stuck behind. But if we were in a different situation, maybe we look a little different. Because to your point, that momentum, that belief, it's contagious, and if you can't get over that hump, it's hard to convince yourself that you eventually can.
And it's also hard too. You lose to Ohio State in week whatever it was 6. Like, how do your season's over? Like, with the way that it is now, just the way that the college football is, it's like if you don't make the CFP, if you have any chance of going pro, you're going to sit out. You're not even going to play in your bowl game, so it doesn't even matter. So with the 12-team playoff is going to be awesome. Like, it's going to be great, not only because
should have been that way from the outset.
Yeah, not only because like you're going to have games in home stadiums, but like you're going to have teams that, should honestly get in, and you're going to then allow what will also allow is teams to slip up more than once. So instead of playing 10 games against the Blind Sisters of the Poor and then 2 games against real teams, you can actually schedule real games so that if you do slip up, you still make it and have a chance. I don't know. The 12 team is going to be fun. We'll have a lot of time to talk about the 12 team because obviously you can tell I'm excited about it. But it'll be cool. It'll be cool coming down the road.
All right, let's talk young Ohio State players that stood out to you here to close up the show. I'm going to go with Jelani Thurman. I think Jelani Thurman's got a chance to be a pretty darn good tight end. And I got to spend a little bit of time with him last winter down at the U.S. Army Bowl and was really, really impressed with him. He was pretty much never going to see the field this year unless it was a situation like tonight. And he got the ball in his hands a couple times, and I think some Ohio State fans are like, whoa, who's this big number 15 that's caught the ball a little bit here? This could be fun to watch.
He could be a lot of fun. He's got that little bit of juice to him. I think an unfair one, Carnell Tate, just because he kind of plays a little bit, but he's still a young cat. So I'll go with I'm going to butcher this, but I'll call him Lincoln. We're just going to go with Lincoln because I don't have a chance on it. Yeah, Keenholz. I think he, we'll see. He's obviously can play football and play quarterback if he's at Ohio State, coming from South Dakota, right, or North Dakota?
South Dakota. Yep.
South Dakota, yeah. So you don't just accidentally end up in Columbus, Ohio from South Dakota. So I'm excited to see what he has, and it was cool to see him get on the field and get to play a little bit this evening.
Glad Evan Pryor got some touches tonight too. I mean, obviously Evan's not a young guy, but somebody that he's been so banged up his whole career. He really hasn't had a lot of opportunities, and for someone that has worked as hard as he has to get healthy, happy that he was able to carry the rock tonight 7 times. So good for him. It's a weird night to be wrapping up a win because there is a contingent of fans that just feels like wake me up when we play a relevant game. And, when you look at the schedule at the beginning of the year, there are a lot of fans that said, okay, Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan, those are the 3 games on the schedule in the regular season. The rest of them aren't going to matter. And the reality is that's not true. They all matter, and you're trying to get better. And I thought the Ohio State team that played tonight looks like an entirely different, confident group than the team that played against Indiana. And I think Michigan State, I know what their records look like next to each other. I think Michigan State's a better team than Indiana is.
Yeah.
It's hard to compare them side by side given the trajectory of the seasons. But if this Ohio State team today played like this, 2.5 months ago in Bloomington, think about how things would have been discussed the last 2.5 months. Totally different light, because this was, again, I know it was 38-3 was the final. You basically didn't play your starters in the second half. This was an evisceration, right? Ohio State didn't do that early on. They were still winning by 20 on the road against Big Ten teams, but they weren't doing it that way. This was as good as Kyle McCord looked. Marvin Harrison Jr. looked like Maserati Marv. Travion's healthy. It's the first time the offense has had all of its starters out on the field healthy since Notre Dame. And this team looks like it's coming into shape. So I totally disagree with it's a 3-game season. Wake me up when you play somebody that's relevant, because you need the games like this to get ready for playing a team like Michigan. And thankfully, you've got a Minnesota team coming in next week who, by the way, beat Iowa. So they found a way to beat a really good defense.
And it's really, Brendan, the way I see it, it's the beauty of a football season. And I think you actually said it in the post game, either after maybe Purdue, where you said it's kind of fun that we're not covering 41-0 games every week, and you're seeing a team grow. And that's really what you've seen this year. Like, we saw Kyle McCord start at the beginning of the year when everyone thought, get this guy out, get him out. He's horrible. He stinks. He's not CJ Stroud. And then tonight, he sets his career record for throwing for 335, 3 touchdowns, and looks like a guy who could lead a team to beat Michigan, to compete in the college football playoff, and looks like everything you want it to be. So while this would have been nice 3 months ago at Indiana, it's the beauty of a football season where a team comes in, they learn each other, they get better, continue to grow, and they have a nice finished product by the end.
530 yards of offense. Only 3 penalties tonight. The Buckeyes only had 11 third downs in 66 total plays. They were incredibly efficient. Pretty darn impressive night all the way around. And are there areas for them to get better? Absolutely. But when they had their best out on the field, especially in the first half, Buckeyes looked a lot like the number 1 team in the country that the College Football Playoff Committee says they are. We've got plenty more coming this week to break down the Buckeyes and Michigan State. 38-3, the final score tonight. Bucks are 10-0 with Minnesota coming to town next week. By the way, it was announced shortly before the game today. Next week's final home game of the year against Minnesota is a 4 p.m. kickoff. The game will be televised live on Big Ten Network. For Anthony Moeglin, I'm Brendan Gulick. Thanks for hanging out. BuckeyesNow.com has all the latest news and info on the team. Of course, we're affiliated with the Fan Nation Network, part of the Sports Illustrated Media Group, and we would appreciate it if you'd subscribe to this YouTube channel so we can keep doing coverage just like this. Have a good night, everybody. 38-3, the final score tonight, Buckeyes over Michigan State.